We think of power as loud, domineering, demanding. But sometimes true power is silent, it watches, it absorbs, it waits. And then one day it withdraws. That is the moment the narcissist never sees coming, the moment the empath is finally fed up, and empath lives by instinct. They extend compassion the way a tree extends shade, naturally, without calculation. Their kindness is not a tactic, not a performance, but a way of existing in the world. They absorb moods, soften tension, and forgive before being asked. To the empath, this is not naivety, it is survival, connection, and humanity at its most raw form. But to the narcissist, it looks like something else entirely. It looks like weakness. The narcissist thrives on hierarchy. They see relationships not as partnerships, but as contests of control. In their worldview, power is taken, never shared. So when confronted with someone endlessly patient, endlessly giving, they do not see generosity. They see an opening. The empath's tolerance is reinterpreted as surrender, as if every act of understanding is a small step back in a battle for dominance. This is the first and most fatal misjudgment. The empath forgives because they understand complexity. They know people are products of wounds, insecurities, and histories untold. They see anger and cruelty not as singular acts, but as signals of deeper pain. And so they stay, they endure, they listen, they patch the cracks the narcissist leaves behind. To the empath, this is compassion in practice. To the narcissist, it is confirmation. I can push further, I can demand more. I can stretch the limits and nothing will break. This cycle repeats. A harsh word met with understanding, a selfish act met with patience, a betrayal met with a willingness to talk it through. The empath bends because that is their way of keeping the world intact. The narcissist interprets the bending as breaking. They assume the empath has no threshold, no breaking point, no final line that cannot be crossed. This is the dangerous illusion. In reality, every act of endurance carries a cost. The empath, though quiet, keeps a silent score. They may not retaliate in the moment, but they record. Every manipulation, every dismissal, every moment of exploitation adds to an internal weight the narcissist cannot see. While the narcissist grows bolder, the empath grows more certain. Patience does not equal blindness. Forgiveness does not equal ignorance. The empath sees exactly what is happening, but chooses not to fight on the narcissist's terms. This is where the misreading becomes fatal. The narcissist mistakes the absence of open resistance for weakness. They fail to grasp that silence can be sharper than confrontation. They fail to recognize that endurance is not endless, only quiet. The empath's kindness is not a lack of strength. It is proof of strength. It is a conscious choice to absorb pain rather than reflect it back, to hold dignity when dignity is denied, to preserve peace even in the midst of chaos. But every choice has its limit. The empath rarely explodes in the moment. They do not retaliate with insults, nor do they storm out of the room when the narcissist pushes too far. Instead, they take it in. They absorb the sting of words, the sting of betrayal, the sting of manipulation. On the outside, it looks as if the empath has let it slide, as if the wound closed instantly without leaving a scar. The narcissist takes this as victory. They assume the slate has been wiped clean. But the empath does not forget. They carry an invisible ledger, a quiet record of everything that has been done to them. This ledger is not written on paper. It is etched in feeling, in memory, in body. Every insult becomes a notch. Every gaslighting moment a tally. Every time their voice was silenced, another entry. The empath may not speak about it, may not confront directly, but nothing vanishes. The narcissist thinks they have manipulated the narrative, rewritten the scene, or erased the past through denial. They are mistaken. The empath's memory is sharper than any denial. It stays quietly, steadily waiting. What makes this ledger powerful is its silence. Unlike an argument, which can be deflected or twisted, silence is irrefutable. The narcissist cannot defend against what is not spoken. They cannot manipulate what is not voiced. The empath doesn't hand them the chance to deny or distort. The record exists privately, beyond reach, untouchable. This is the difference between reactive power and patient power. The narcissist wields the first. The empath masters the second. Over time, the ledger grows heavier. The empath feels it in their chest, in their fatigue, in the slow erosion of trust. They might forgive individual incidents, but forgiveness does not erase memory. It only places a veil over it. That veil can lift at any moment, and when it does, the empath does not see isolated mistakes. They see the full pattern, the complete architecture of manipulation, the entire design laid bare. This is when the empath begins to detach, not angrily, not dramatically, but with a deep internal certainty that nothing will change. The narcissist never anticipates this moment because they have lived in the illusion of control. They believed the empath had no inner record, no ongoing awareness. They believed their tactics erased the past. But the empath's ledger is not just a record of wrongs, it is a map of the narcissist's behavior. It reveals cycles, repetitions, strategies. What once confused the empath now becomes predictable. What once hurt becomes evidence. The empath shifts from victim to observer, from participant to analyst. This is the silent danger. The narcissist thinks they are still playing a game of dominance, still several moves ahead. They do not see that the empath has stopped playing altogether. They do not realize the empath's silence is no longer compliance, but calculation. They fail to grasp that every act of cruelty has not vanished into thin air, but has been stored, organized, understood. The ledger has been written. And once the empath decides to act on it, the narcissist will face a reckoning they never saw coming. The empath rarely telegraphs their limits. They do not raise red flags in advance, nor do they declare ultimatums. They endure quietly, stretching their patience further and further, giving second chances, third chances, sometimes 100th chances. To the narcissist, this looks like endless elasticity. It appears as though the empath has no threshold, no line in the sand, no final point beyond which they cannot be pushed. This illusion feeds the narcissist's confidence. They believe the empath can be stretched infinitely, bent indefinitely, reshaped at will. But the reality is far different. The empath does not announce their breaking point. They reach it in silence. Unlike others who erupt or rebel, the empath simply keeps absorbing. They appear calm. They appear tolerant. They even appear complicit. The narcissist grows more reckless, convinced that their control is absolute. They escalate insults, betrayals, manipulations, never once stopping to consider the hidden cost. They misread the empath's stillness as acceptance, when in truth it is quiet resistance, a kind of endurance that gathers strength beneath the surface. Every slight builds pressure, every wound deepens the fracture, but no one outside the empath can see the gathering storm. There are no outward signs, no visible cracks. The empath carries it all in silence until one day the container overflows. This breaking point is invisible because it does not follow the narcissist's script. The narcissist expects loud conflict. They expect pleading or begging. They expect tears that can be mocked or apologies that can be demanded. They thrive on drama because drama keeps the spotlight on them. What they cannot handle is absence. What they cannot process is detachment. When the empath reaches the breaking point, they do not explode, they evaporate. They withdraw their attention, their energy, their emotional labor. They vanish without spectacle. And for the narcissist, this is more destabilizing than any confrontation could ever be. The power of the invisible breaking point lies in its unpredictability. The narcissist cannot measure when it will come. They cannot anticipate the final straw because the empath gives no clue. There is no raised voice, no warning, no sign that the end is near. Then suddenly, the dynamic collapses. The narcissist finds themselves alone, stripped of supply, facing silence instead of argument, indifference instead of emotion. The rug is pulled from beneath them without notice. The shock is total. The control they thought was permanent evaporates overnight. This invisible threshold transforms the empath from the one who bends into the one who leaves. And when they leave, they do not look back. The narcissist is left reeling, not just from the loss, but from the blindness. They never saw it coming. They thought they had mapped the empath's psychology, controlled every reaction, choreographed every move. They failed to see that endurance was never infinite. They failed to realize that the quietest breaking point is also the most final. The empath is a creature of patience. They stretch themselves thin, carrying the moods of others, forgiving more than most would, excusing patterns that would break another. Their tolerance is not passive. It is active, deliberate, rooted in their desire to see the good even in the worst. To the narcissist, this patience appears limitless. It becomes a signal, a green light that says, push further, test harder, demand more. They see no edge, no limit, no wall. They misinterpret patience as permanence. The narcissist thrives on control. They test boundaries, poke for weaknesses, and escalate behaviors when there are no consequences. Each test that passes unanswered emboldens them. The empath absorbs another insult, and the narcissist concludes they are safe. The empath forgives another betrayal, and the narcissist concludes they are untouchable. Every survival of conflict convinces the narcissist that the empath has no threshold. They mistake quiet for consent, softness for surrender. They live under the illusion that the empath will never break. What the narcissist cannot see is that the breaking point is not a performance. It is not an explosion of rage, not a shouted declaration of independence, not a dramatic fight. It builds quietly, without fanfare, without announcement. Each wound adds weight. Each manipulation creates a crack. Each humiliation tightens the pressure. The empath, skilled at holding their own pain, keeps it hidden from view. They do not show their exhaustion. They do not reveal the gathering storm. They continue with calm faces, even laughter, even care. But beneath the surface, the silent container fills, then it happens. Not gradually, not with warning, but all at once. The empath reaches their invisible limit. The vessel that held all the unspoken hurts can hold no more. But instead of shouting, they withdraw. Instead of fighting, they detach. They step back with a stillness the narcissist has never encountered. No warnings, no negotiations, no second chances. The breaking point is crossed, and the empath simply exits the game. This is what makes it invisible. There are no signs leading up to it, no trail to predict it. One moment the narcissist believes they are in control, the next they find themselves abandoned in silence. The narcissist cannot process this shift. They are prepared for battles, for begging, for pleas they can manipulate. They are not prepared for indifference. They know how to exploit anger, but not absence. When the empath stops reacting, the narcissist loses their stage. Their audience disappears. The entire performance collapses, and in this collapse lies the true reversal. The empath, once the quiet absorber, becomes the decisive actor. The narcissist, once the master of control, becomes the one disoriented, powerless, desperate. The invisible breaking point is not just about leaving. It is about transformation. The empath who reaches it is no longer the same. They see the full pattern with clarity. They stop forgiving in circles. They stop interpreting cruelty as pain to be healed. The breaking point is the moment their compassion no longer works against them. It becomes the line that redraws their life. And once it is crossed, there is no return. The narcissist survives on attention. It does not matter whether the attention is positive or negative. A compliment is fuel, but so is an argument. A declaration of love feeds them, but so does a scream of frustration. What terrifies the narcissist is not hatred. What terrifies them is emptiness. As long as the empath engages, even in pain, the narcissist feels powerful. They rely on this engagement like oxygen. When the empath finally withdraws, the entire dynamic collapses. Withdrawal is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with slammed doors or angry speeches. It happens in small silences, in subtle detachment, in the removal of energy that once sustained the bond. The empath no longer reacts to provocations. They no longer defend themselves against false accusations. They no longer explain, no longer justify, no longer argue. They let the narcissist's words fall flat in the air. They allow manipulation to echo without response. This absence is the one thing the narcissist cannot control. For the empath, withdrawal is not weakness. It is strategy. It is the quiet reclaiming of energy that has been siphoned for too long. The empath understands that confrontation fuels the narcissist, but silence starves them. They realize that boundaries enforced without explanation are stronger than endless reasoning. They understand that disengagement is not escape, but resistance in its purest form. By walking away emotionally, even before walking away physically, they dismantle the structure of control piece by piece. The narcissist reacts with confusion. At first, they test harder, creating bigger provocations to spark a response. They stage crises, deliver insults, play victim. When none of this works, they grow frantic. The empath's silence unsettles them more than shouting ever could. Without a mirror to reflect their power back, the narcissist loses definition. Their identity relies on being seen, being heard, being felt. Without the empath's energy, they become hollow, restless. Destabilized withdrawal is powerful because it reverses the dynamic. The empath no longer feeds the system. They no longer play the role assigned to them. They become untouchable in their stillness. While the narcissist spirals, the empath grows stronger and quiet. Every moment of disengagement is a moment of healing. Every withheld response is a piece of dignity reclaimed. The narcissist, who once dictated the tempo of every interaction, suddenly dances alone to music no one else hears. This shift reveals the truth. The narcissist was never in control. They only borrowed control from the empath's willingness to engage. The empath's attention was the real source of power, and once it is gone, the illusion collapses. The narcissist is left scrambling for new supply, chasing echoes of a bond that no longer exists. The empath, meanwhile, discovers freedom not in confrontation but in absence. Withdrawal becomes the weapon that ends the cycle not with fire, but with silence. The empath has always lived by sensing what others cannot articulate. They notice the tone that shifts mid-sentence, the pause that lasts a fraction too long, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes. This sensitivity has been both a gift and a burden. In the presence of a narcissist, it initially becomes a trap. The empath reads every mood and adapts to it. They anticipate needs before they are spoken. They smooth conflicts before they ignite. Their intuition is used against them, twisted into a tool that serves the narcissist's hunger for control. At first, this dynamic leaves the empath exhausted. They spend their energy predicting storms, cushioning blows, repairing damage. The narcissist thrives on this invisible labor. They exploit the empath's ability to see patterns, using it to offload responsibility for their own chaos. But the empath is not blind. Over time, what once felt like care begins to feel like repetition. The empath starts noticing that the same patterns repeat endlessly, the same accusations, the same games, the same manipulations dressed in different disguises. Intuition, which once only reacted, begins to analyze. This is the turning point. The empath shifts from being a passive receiver of moods to an active observer of strategies. They begin to catalog the cycle. They see the flattery before the demand. They see the silent treatment before the guilt trip. They see the rage before the apology. What once confused them now reveals itself as a script. And once you recognize a script, you cannot unsee it. The empath begins to anticipate the next move not with fear, but with clarity. They stop reacting. They start predicting. For the narcissist, this change is dangerous. Their power depends on surprise, on keeping the empath unbalanced. If the empath no longer reacts emotionally, the manipulation loses force. If the empath sees the tactic coming, the trap collapses before it closes. What was once fuel now becomes data. Every attempt at control turns into further evidence of the pattern. The empath no longer interprets insults as truths or apologies as change. They read them as lines in a play, lines they no longer believe in. The narcissist senses something shift. They may not understand it fully, but they feel the loss of control. Their words no longer land. Their silences no longer intimidate. Their games no longer create chaos. They are left with the hollow shell of tactics that once worked flawlessly. Meanwhile, the empath grows stronger. Intuition sharpens into strategy. Sensitivity becomes foresight. They do not fight harder. They fight differently. They remove the element of surprise, leaving the narcissist exposed and predictable. This transformation marks the beginning of liberation. The empath no longer spends their energy patching wounds or decoding contradictions. They conserve their energy, knowing exactly when the cycle will repeat. The narcissist becomes transparent, a figure acting out the same tired routine. And once the pattern is fully seen, it loses its grip. What once felt like confusion becomes certainty. What once felt like weakness becomes wisdom. Intuition turned into strategy becomes the empath's shield. The empath spends much of their life entangled in the emotions of others. They feel pain that is not theirs. They carry burdens that were never placed in their hands directly. In the relationship with a narcissist, this entanglement becomes a prison. The empath is drawn into every mood swing, every crisis, every performance. Their identity starts dissolving into the chaos of the other. They forget where they end and where the narcissist begins. This fusion is exactly what the narcissist relies on. As long as the empath is entangled, they remain accessible, predictable. Exploitable detachment is the rupture of this prison. It begins quietly. The empath no longer feels compelled to fix every situation. They stop rushing to soothe every wound. They notice the manipulation but do not rush to explain it away. They hear the familiar accusations but no longer feel the sting. The emotional hook that once yanked them into endless battles loses its grip. They begin to observe instead of absorb. The difference is subtle at first but grows into a revolution. For the first time, the empath experiences what it means to have boundaries not as walls of anger but as spaces of freedom. Detachment is not indifference. It is clarity. The empath sees the narcissist's behavior without distortion. They stop filtering cruelty through excuses. They stop translating abuse into misunderstood love. They no longer confuse drama for intimacy. Detachment reveals reality in its stark form. The narcissist is no longer a mystery, no longer a puzzle to solve. They are simply what they are: predictable, repetitive, shallow in their demands. This shift transforms the empath from captive to witness. Observation without absorption is power. For the narcissist, detachment is catastrophic. They thrive on reaction, on knowing they can provoke emotion. Rage, guilt, tears, these are the currencies they trade in. When the empath no longer pays in those currencies, the system collapses. The narcissist rages louder, pleads harder, manipulates more desperately, but nothing penetrates the new wall of detachment. Their grand performance is played to an empty theater. The silence is unbearable. The lack of emotional return reveals their dependence. The balance of power inverts. The empath, once drained and diminished, now holds the advantage simply by refusing to engage. The empath feels the liberation immediately. What once consumed their days no longer touches them. Their mind clears. Their body lightens. Energy that was once siphoned into endless conflict returns to them. They discover hobbies again. They laugh without needing permission. They connect with others without fear of betrayal lurking in every corner. Detachment does not erase the scars, but it stops the bleeding. The cycle ends not with a battle won, but with a chain dropped. This is why detachment is freedom. It is not about punishing the narcissist. It is not about revenge. It is about reclaiming the self that was lost in the fog of manipulation. It is the rediscovery of space, of choice, of dignity. The empath realizes they are no longer bound to the script. They can walk away at any moment. They can rebuild without permission. They can exist without carrying the weight of another's illusions. Detachment severs the tie that once defined them. In that severance, freedom emerges. The empath enters the relationship with open hands and an open heart. They believe in the possibility of healing, in the idea that patience and love can soften even the hardest edges. For a long time, this belief is what keeps them tethered. They endure insults, they endure manipulation, they endure cycles of hope and disappointment. But when the breaking point comes, when silence replaces pleading and detachment replaces reaction, a new version of the empath begins to emerge. What once looked like fragility transforms into resilience. What once felt like weakness crystallizes into strength. The empath becomes the survivor. The narcissist does not survive in the same way. They remain locked in repetition. They perform the same tactics on new targets, forever searching for supply, forever dependent on others to confirm their worth. They may appear powerful, but their survival is fragile. It requires constant feeding, constant validation, constant control. Remove the supply and the narcissist withers. By contrast, when the empath withdraws and detaches, they do not wither. They grow, they learn, they rebuild. Survival for the narcissist is dependence. Survival for the empath is transformation. The process is not instant. The empath must confront the scars left behind. They must face the erosion of trust, the doubts about their own judgment, the fragments of self they handed over too easily. But this confrontation becomes a furnace. Through reflection, they gain clarity. Through pain, they gain wisdom. They begin to see the cycle for what it was. They recognize the illusions they believed in. They forgive themselves for not leaving sooner. In this confrontation, they recover not only their strength, but also their self-respect. They emerge more cautious, more discerning, more unwilling to be deceived again. The narcissist never reaches this stage. They cannot confront themselves because self-examination threatens their entire construct. They cannot admit fault because their identity relies on perfection. They cannot grow because growth requires humility. While the empath is busy reconstructing a stronger foundation, the narcissist remains trapped in the same crumbling house. The empath evolves, the narcissist repeats. This is the ultimate difference between them. One uses suffering as raw material for transformation. The other denies suffering and remains chained to it as the empath heals. They also discover new capacities. Boundaries become second nature. Intuition sharpens into foresight. Independence becomes a source of pride rather than fear. They learn to value their energy as something sacred. They learn to choose relationships that nourish instead of drain. They learn that saying no is not cruelty, but survival. Each lesson adds to their strength until they are no longer defined by the pain that once consumed them. They are defined instead by the clarity that pain created. This is why the empath becomes the stronger survivor. Not because they avoided harm, but because they endured it, understood it, and rose from it with new eyes. The narcissist remains the same character in the same story. The empath writes a new story altogether. Survival for them is not about returning to who they were before. It is about becoming someone they never imagined they could be: stronger, sharper, freer, and untouchable in ways the narcissist will never comprehend.